Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At issue tonight, coronavirus. The Mississippi Department of Health is trying to prevent and control its spread. This week, the health department reported the state's first case of the virus in a Forest County man who had recently traveled to Florida. He was not hospitalized, but was voluntarily isolating himself at home. 2 other cases have since been reported. The Department of Health has tested at least 42 people. At a press conference this week, the state health officer, Dr. Thomas Dobbs, warned Mississippians not to panic.
Just an overview of the coronavirus and give us some real perspective about what it is. So coronavirus, or COVID-19, is a novel coronavirus. It causes a flu-like symptoms. Most of the illnesses are relatively mild, although it does cause severe illness in some people, particularly older people and people with chronic underlying medical conditions are at high risk for bad outcomes. So that's something to consider. It doesn't seem that children are much affected, thankfully, and most people with coronavirus or COVID-19 will make a full recovery. Only a small proportion, less than 1%, are likely to have severe outcomes or death. There is no antiviral treatment for COVID-19 at this time. There is no vaccine, although one is in development. We do have testing at the State Department of Health lab, and to obtain testing, a physician needs to submit it to us, and we can get results back typically within 36 to 48 hours, if not less, depending on what time in the morning that we get it. So we do have it available. The testing is already available through commercial labs.
Everybody needs to use common sense. This is containable and is minimized by the use of common sense. And our Mississippi people know to wash their hands, report yourself when you're sick. We had one citizen already do exactly the right thing. So we encourage everybody to do exactly the right thing. And we will get through this as a society, as we always have. We should anticipate this will be disruptive. It's going to be different for a period of time. And so we will deal with that as we have everything else.
Initiative 65 is a proposal to legalize medical marijuana in Mississippi by way of a constitutional amendment. More than 200,000 people have signed a petition to get the initiative on the November ballot. On Tuesday, members of the House voted to add another proposal to the ballot. Republican Representative Joel Baumgar supports Initiative 65, also known as Medical Marijuana 2020. He says it would enable doctors to prescribe up to 5 ounces of marijuana a month for someone with a debilitating condition.
Both of my parents died from the kind of cancer that takes over your body, shuts it down, and you die in an extraordinary amount of pain over years or months or however long that process goes. And they had chemotherapy, they had opioids, they had all of that stuff, and they died in extreme pain. I remember my dad telling me that every day he woke up and his question for the day was, will I be able to stay on top of the pain today? After my parents passed away, I was talking to some of the cancer doctors that were involved in their treatment, and they told me that medical marijuana would have really helped my parents, but that they were not even allowed to tell them about it.
So I'm in a massive cannabis field right now, and we're not in Colombia or Colorado. We're actually in China, near the Himalayas.
Local farmers have been tending this field for the past 5 months, and today they're ready to harvest the fruits of their labor. They're about to chop down 24 tons of cannabis.
然后我们现在种工业大麻的话，可能会比玉米要翻一个番。然后我们的话，净利润大概会在个300万元左右。
A few months ago, this plot was all tobacco and corn. But now, Yang Liu, who manages this field, says they're growing hemp, a strain of the cannabis plant known for the increasingly popular non-psychotropic component, CBD. The CBD market in the US will grow by 700% this year and be worth more than $23 billion by 2023. And China wants a piece of that. Fields like this in Yunnan province are now a part of a growing CBD boom in China. Research analysts say Yunnan and Heilongjiang provinces alone produced just over 11% of the global CBD supply last year.
The extract is taken from these plants, then sold in the US.
Demand for CBD from China has ballooned because of its supposed health virtues. Consumer products infused with CBD like coffee, bath bombs, and gummy bears claim to help with pain and relaxation.
花里面的 CBD 含量会高一点，你可以闻一下。
Oh, wow. Kind of sweet and fruity in a way?
闻着像钱。
I have 30 years of commodity experience, originally electricity, natural gas, coal, through petrochemicals, and ultimately in the 2012 timeframe, saw the cannabis market starting to open up and thought, hey, it's another commodity. This is a great opportunity. It's a market that's opaque, and deals are done in the dark, bilaterally, and transparency in pricing makes more efficient markets. And so now we've recently launched our hemp benchmarks, and we're excited to talk about the hemp market today.
Great, thank you, Jonathan.
So it's been 5 years since Colorado became the first state to legalize recreational marijuana, infusing the drug into politics and everyday life. The New York Times article Reefer Madness or Pot Paradise, ? The surprising legacy of the place where legal weed began, examines the impacts of legalization on the state that we're seeing now. The author of that article is New York Times national correspondent Jack Healy, joining me now from Boulder, Colorado. Thanks for joining me. This was a really interesting article.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So I go back, 5 years, and I think about all the concerns that were popping up when Colorado was about to legalize marijuana, especially the kids. As my dad would say, the kids are going to start smoking those funny cigarettes, and they won't go to school, and there'll be, concerns about people driving while under the influence, and everyone will become sort of a layabout. But what have you learned about the impacts of this legalization of recreational marijuana, particularly on the young people of Colorado?
Well, I think your dad's concerns were really reflected in the concerns of public health officials and doctors and everybody else who had, worries about this. But what we're seeing is a really complicated and nuanced kind of picture 5 years out. And one of the big takeaways is that kids actually, according to the best state numbers that we can find, they're not smoking more. Basically, you have not seen some sort of huge escalation in youth use. That said, there are a lot of families and a lot of educators and health officials, who think that there's been sort of a cultural proliferation, and that, kids that I talked to said that when they walk down the street to school, they're sort of growing up in this era where they're walking by pot shops, that are on their regular route to school every day, or on their route to an after-school practice, or something like that. And they're sort of just growing up in an era where things are really normal, and that the kids who are doing pot are doing it in different ways than maybe when you and I were younger. They're getting it from older siblings who are buying it in dispensaries, or they're using vaporizers to do it, or they're getting their hands on edibles and things like that. And those are real concerns, I think, for public health folks and educators. But overall, we haven't seen sort of some dramatic, spike in youth use. Adults are using more, though.
And so I want you to take a minute and reflect on what you're doing right now to keep your mind and your body healthy. What tools are you using, and what tools would you like to add to your existing regimen? Cannabinoid therapy is just one tool that can assist, especially with your endocannabinoid system, or ECS. That's the largest regulatory system in our body that modulates other processes like pain, mood, sleep, digestion, and even our immune system. It can bring balance and stability to a chaotic system, and right now some of us might be facing that imbalance or chaos. So fortunately for you, the Realm of Caring, our research library, contains several peer-reviewed journal articles that suggest that when we feed our ECS endogenous cannabinoids like CBD, THC, CBN, we activate specific receptors like the CB1 and CB2 receptors, and when your body is fighting a virus, the ECS can be depleted, and cannabis can help replenish the endogenous cannabinoids that have been depleted. So if you're laying awake at night, can cannabis help you relax? If you're anxious or frustrated, can a supplement help calm you down? Those are all possibilities and consider other tools in your toolkit in addition to cannabis, whether that's meditation, eating healthy, drinking enough water, and exercising. In the ROC client portal, there's a beautiful infographic to remind you about your wellness toolkit. If you have questions or want to learn more about cannabinoid therapy, give Realm of Caring a call or send us an email, and we want to hear from our community. So what tools are you using to keep your mind and body healthy these days?
Also, one of the conversations happening 5 years ago was the criminal justice system and the number of people who were behind bars because of marijuana-related crimes, sometimes low amounts of marijuana. And the idea was that this would sort of fix that.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of low-level arrests basically vanishing, especially for adults, because if you're an adult, it is perfectly legal to have a small amount of marijuana, to consume it, to buy it, to grow it, that sort of things.
I like it.
I mean, joking aside, though, if we step back a second, and I think Bill opened with this, and it is so poignant, right? Like 10 years ago, to think that cannabis would be considered an essential business is like, who would have thought?
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that it is ludicrous and offensive to me that people are left to their own devices to cook their cannabis down into the medicine that they need to manage their symptoms. I mean, this is medicine for people. And I think we need to find more creative ways to diversify our market here in New Jersey and across the country to address that. Because, for some, it's not that big a deal, and it's, it's a joint here and it's a joint there and it's a little consumption. But that's not, to me, that is up there with the social justice stuff, to just say, well, just smoke it. I don't know why we're not more demanding of diversity of products, because this is our health and these are our lungs, and it's a real, especially now, the risk and the reward of this is one that's going to feel a lot more delicate to many patients, right? That if they're starting to feel, and you've seen it all over the internet, is this a cold? Is this my allergies? Or is this the beginning of COVID? If you're kind of sitting there doing that waiting dance of 24 or 48 hours to see where you're going, and for many of us, I hope that it's, mild, or that it is just your seasonal allergies. The dynamic, though, is, do you want to take the gamble of smoking something? And that's real. And I think that if we pretend that that's not an anxiety on people's minds, I think we're deluding ourselves to some of the complexity of our patients and the people that need this as medicine.
So there are places where people will absolutely just take over an entire house and grow marijuana in every square inch they can, sometimes even cutting off the electrical meters. So there's not a suspicious, spike in the meter reading, for folks who are out there looking for signs of illegal grows, because it's still legal to grow a number of plants in your own home if you're a Colorado resident, but you can't sort of be off growing hundreds and hundreds of plants like some people are in these illegal grows.
Right. So the article, Reefer Madness or Pot Paradise, it's in the New York Times. I think it's a great snapshot. You also talk about sort of the health impacts, the change in political conversations in regards to marijuana that we can't get to, but I think people should really check it out. Jack Healy, thank you very much.
Because every part of the hemp plant can be used, so there's virtually no waste. The seeds are packed with protein, amino acids, and actually make for a wonderful health snack. Personally, I enjoy hemp seeds on my morning yogurt with my glass of orange juice. But on top of that, the most important part of the hemp plant is the stalks and the fibers, because these are where the industrial uses come into play. So, one of these uses, as I mentioned before, is to make paper and canvases. But what you didn't know is that hemp is actually the ideal plant to do so. This is because it only requires 90 days to grow, 3 months compared to trees that take a lifetime. On top of that, I want you guys to think about the global economic implications that this would have. The jobs that would be created, the forests that would be saved, and the species that wouldn't go extinct if we just use hemp to make paper. On top of these uses, you can make biodiesel from hemp. And actually, the creator of the diesel engine, Rudolf Diesel, intended for the diesel engine to be run on hemp. You might have heard of Henry Ford, and he took this idea of the diesel engine and added another step to it. So not only did his car run on hemp oil, it was actually made from hemp plastic. Yeah, I said it, hemp plastic, a biodegradable, green alternative to the current plastics we're using. And on top of that, it was proven to be 10 times stronger than steel. So, biodiesel, paper, what else can we do with hemp?
So to start off, one of the topics we wanted to cover was the general confusion around all the rules and regulations around hemp and CBD. We know back in December the Farm Bill got passed, which legalized the production of industrial hemp, which up until that point had actually been on a level on par with heroin. So in December that changed, but we're still seeing trucks that are carrying hemp travel through states that aren't as friendly. For example, farmers that are from Oregon or Kentucky are going through other states like Oklahoma and Idaho and are getting pulled over, arrested, their product is being confiscated, and this is a huge issue for the industry right now. So one of the first questions is just how is this confusion and uncertainty affecting the growth of the industry, and any ideas on when people think this will start to clear up?
Go ahead. Sure. So, there's certainly a lot of confusion and a lot of challenges in the industry right now, and a lot of that is stemming from, the fact that hemp and CBD is, really regulated at the federal level, but it leaves a lot of loopholes open. From a CBD side of things, there are not regulations in place that will really bring this into a great level of clarity. So while cultivation was allowed for at the federal level in the Farm Bill, what it basically dictated was that states were able to make their own rules surrounding cultivation, and they were able to authorize farmers, authorize firms to be able to cultivate within those states. Now, that says nothing about retail sales. That says nothing about these products turning into an actual commercial market. So what happens is that while it's legal to grow, if you are authorized to do so by your state, it is not necessarily legal to sell it in whatever form it may take place. Now, the Farm Bill essentially took this from the purview of the DEA, which was on a Controlled Substances Act, and put it into the purview of the FDA. Now the FDA is trying to figure out what to do with it. It hasn't been permitted by the FDA. There's a lot of, the FDA is trying to come up with a rational way to approach it. So, while from the CBD side of things, there are products that are being carried, throughout the country. There are different states that have different approaches to it. Some states have regulations in place that openly permit it. Other states have regulations in place that are actively prohibiting it. Other states have no regulations in place and are trying to find ways to grapple with this from a regulatory standpoint. So there's a lot of confusion that's happening in the industry right now. I will say that this industry is certainly one that has grown up with the mentality of ask forgiveness instead of permission. So for every one person that stopped someone who has their product seized off of a store shelves in Oklahoma, there's thousands of others that aren't. There's hundreds and hundreds of companies that are growing up within the space and seeing multi-millions of dollars worth of sales per year. And the minority are the ones that are seeing law enforcement or seeing actions against them. Well, that's certainly a challenge. The regulatory status right now is such that multinational corporations are looking at this, their legal teams are looking at it very closely and identifying that this is an area where, at least from a retailer standpoint, the risk level is low enough that they're willing to try it. And that's a really significant shift from before December.
All right, thank you.